Hi, everyone. This is Steve Rozenberg with Mynd Property Management. Today, I'm joined with Brandon Graham, who is our portfolio manager in our Phoenix operation. Brandon, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me.
So what I'd like to know is if I am a landlord and I own a rental property in the Phoenix area, what would you say are the top 3 things that I should be looking for when I am selecting a tenant? Because this is the biggest fear, I think, of most landlords when you own a rental property is, are they going to trash my property? How do I find the right one? And I don't think that many people have criteria or policies and procedures. So I'd like to hear from you on your thoughts of how best to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And 100% agree. This is the number one question that I have coming up with new landlords in terms of what do I look for in a resident? How do we screen them? So certainly a lot of important factors in terms of like a top 3. I would go to certainly their credit and not so much the score. Like a score is not necessarily an arbitrary number, but the content of that report is more important. So really looking through to determine what their debt to income ratio is. If they have collections, what kind of collection accounts are those? You know, if somebody has student loan debt or maybe medical debt, it's honestly not as concerning. Whereas if you see somebody with utility collections, they owe money, you know, to their previous electrical provider, even cable and internet type of things, especially if they have open judgments with prior landlords, they owe money to a previous apartment that they lived in. Those are all very important things on their credit report. Of course, rental history is extremely important. How long were they in their previous homes? You know, do they have a pattern of moving every 6 months or every year, or do they stay put long term? Obviously, the longer you can keep somebody in your property, the bigger return on investment you're going to have. And then, you know, security deposit refunds. Did the last landlord give them a full deposit refund, or did they have to withhold all of that to pay for various repairs? So, you know, speaking with those landlords, and here at Mynd, we have the technology necessary to make sure that we are actually speaking with their former landlord and not just some friend that they're putting down on an application, right? So that's extremely important. And then, of course, income. Do they have enough money to pay the rent every month? Generally, we like to see that they make at least 3 times the monthly rent here. That will ensure that, again, they have enough funds to pay their rent every month and keep up with any unexpected expenses. The last thing you want is to get an email from your resident saying, I'm not going to be able to make my rent payment because, you know, the transmission went out of my car and I've got to come up with that. You know, you want to make sure that these people are able to pay their rent every month and account for an emergency.
Yeah, and those are great points. And I think that overall, you know, if you're a landlord and you're thinking of how do you select the tenant, you have to ask yourself, okay, what is the type of person that I want in my property? Number one, what is that persona? And how can I basically mitigate any potential chances of them not paying? And so I have always learned that if you look at their past, you'll see their future many times. So if you're talking to a resident, you want to make sure that, you know, you do the trust but verify. Meaning if they say something, that's great, you trust it, but you also verify it. And that's when, as Brandon said, that's when you call the prior landlords, you call employers. You know, if they have a issue with their credit, that may be okay, but you want to see why do they have an issue? You know, what is the reason? Is it landlords that they owe? Do they owe a bunch of prior rental places? Or is it a school loan that they're trying to pay off? And that could affect your credit differently. But again, that's why you want to really look at what is it telling you, because the information will tell you a story. I think sometimes as landlords, we get into an emotional rush and we want to hurry up and put someone in the property. And maybe sometimes we convince ourselves that this person is the right person. But the challenge then is you may have put the wrong person in and now you've taken someone else's problem and they now become your problem. And getting someone out is much, much harder than not ever putting them in.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
sometimes
very well said.
sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And this is one of those situations that, you know, just because your property is vacant, don't think that putting the wrong person in is going to solve that problem. You actually may have amplified it and made it worse by rushing and putting the wrong person in. So again, be very cognizant of who you're putting in the property. More importantly, I would say with all of that, make sure you have a written policy and procedure that you follow. Do not deviate from that. You know, that's how fair housing and discrimination suits start coming in, because if you don't have a policy and procedure written down and followed, you could be asked, why did you select one tenant over the other? And it's got to be documented. So again, remember, you are running a business. Residents have rights, and you want to make sure that you adhere to those rights and you respect them. And you also want to make sure that you're running your business effectively when you are doing that. Obviously, if you don't want to handle that, we can take care of that for you. But if you do, just remember to, slow down, speed up, be effective with your time, and make sure you trust and verify everything, just as Brandon had said. So Brandon, thank you so much for your time. If somebody does want to talk to us about managing the properties or just kind of talk to you about the Phoenix area, how would they do that?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. Best way to reach us is certainly from our website, which is mind.co. Mind is M-Y-N-D, by the way. And my email address is brandon.graham@mind.co.
Okay, and for those of you that want to know more about investing, we do have a Facebook group. It's a great group with a lot of very experienced investors in there, engaging, conversing, just trying to communicate maybe similar challenges you may have and answering questions. It's the Mindful Investor, the Mastermind Real Estate Investment Club. So the Mastermind is MYND, Real Estate Investment Club. And we also have a podcast show that comes out every week with leading experts in the industry. It's called the Mindful Investor Podcast. And again, that's MYND. So the Mindful Investor Podcast comes out on iTunes, Spotify, and all other channels. And again, we want to know not only how people are successful, but how they overcame some challenges and failures so that you could learn from them as well. So on behalf of Brandon and myself at Mind, we'd like to thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.